Hey everyone, and welcome back. It is wonderful to see all of you design cutters tuning in, and it is also wonderful to be joined by possibly our favorite artist in the whole world because he's so awesome, Nathan from Trailhead. How are you, Nathan?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much. That's too kind. Too kind.
What are you going to be sharing with us today?
We're going to be looking at a couple of paintings that I have done in Adobe Fresco. And we're going to look at some of the features that I found to be really cool and unique to Fresco. And yeah, we're gonna get a little paint on the screen and talk about some different techniques with this particular app.
Incredible. Well, over to you, Maestro. I can't wait to see it.
All right. So Adobe Fresco. So this. I just started in this app just a few weeks ago. I started playing with it. I'm primarily a Procreate person. So there was a little bit of getting used to, but I found some things about this app that are completely unique, I think, to Fresco, because it kind of falls in between like Procreate and Photoshop to me. Like some of the brushes are more similar to like Photoshop and some of the features, but then there are definitely some Procreate aspects. So I think if you're used to using either one of those, you would adapt to Fresco pretty easily. One thing that I did, I'm just going to show you real quick, is I changed to the dark theme. And if you click the little cog and app settings, and you can change from the light theme to the dark theme. That's just what I usually use in Procreate, so I just swapped that. It's not. I think the light theme is the default, and I just swapped that just because I found it looked a little bit more like what I was used to. But what I find the most incredible about Fresco is the live brushes, and I'm sure if you have this app, you've played with the live brushes, specifically the watercolor brushes, because you know that I love watercolor, and these are very unique in the way that they blend and bleed together, kind of like real watercolor. So if you were to paint, and I'm using the live brush, and I'm using the watercolor round detail, and if you add a different color, and you can kind of see, especially if the water flow is set to 100, if you see that they blend and bleed together really well. And they continue to bleed together after the stroke, which is really, really incredible to me. I just a unique feature to this app that is just a lot of fun. And especially if I picked the second one, the wash, and even the wet splatters, and the way that they act like real traditional watercolor, which I love. Now, another thing that I just found, I didn't find this at first, but I discovered it as I was painting and using the app. But the color picker has this feature where you can select, it's this little icon down here in the bottom left, and you can move this around, and it will select multiple colors to paint with. So it's now using 2 colors. That's really cool.
That's awesome.
And I love how everything just continues to bleed together.
Wow. Do you mind sharing that one more time, please? The 2 colors.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Let me show you with a different brush too, because it works a couple of different ways. So if you choose, let me clear this so I can show you larger.
Perfect. We also have people asking, are you on the iPad or computer right now?
Oh, this is an iPad Pro.
Okay, great.
Okay, so I'm going to put 2 colors side by side. Let's go with a little bit lighter green. 2 colors side by side. And I'm going to take the picker and I'm going to move it, color picker, and I'm going to move it. And you can see down here in the left that it's using the blue and green with a hard edge transition. And then I'm going to choose a live brush, and it's using that same hard edge transition even in the pixel brushes. It uses that hard edge, right? But if we take a watercolor brush and we blend those edges together so that it's a softer transition, like especially right in here, we move that over. Now it's using a soft transition, right? So the transition between the two colors is softer.
Ooh,
does that make sense? Is that a better demonstration?
That's amazing. Yeah, thank you.
Cool. And it works for both the pixel brushes and the live paint brushes. So you can paint with two colors with the pixel brushes or with live paint. Pretty cool. I thought that was an interesting interesting feature, that the paints will bleed together, and that you can select more than one color, and you can change the transition between the colors to paint with. I just found that to be really cool and really unique. All right, so I did a painting of a leopard that I'm going to walk you through. I'm going to talk about some of the ways that I used these brushes. I painted primarily with the live paint brushes because I was so enamored with just how they worked. I thought they were really cool. And so I wanted to use those primarily in this painting. Now, one thing I did have a problem with in Fresco was finding a pencil brush to sketch with that I felt like was what I was used to. Now, there are some pencil brushes that come with the free version, but I just felt like that they weren't what I was used to in like Procreate or Photoshop. So I just took a paintbrush. I think this was the one from the Basic. It was like a hard round, and I just sized it down so that it was close to a pencil. So my sketch is a little wonky, but that's why I couldn't find my usual pencil brush. Now, I was trying to keep in mind with this painting, I wanted to use the tools that would come with the free version of Fresco. So I didn't want to, if you get the paid version or you're a subscriber to Adobe, you have the ability with Fresco to import your own brushes or third-party brushes. But with this particular painting, I wanted to stick with what came free, right? I wanted to use just what you would get if you had the free version of Fresco. So understand, as I walk through this painting, I'm only using tools that come with Fresco, the free version.
Awesome.
So from here, I painted in some spots. And now with this particular painting, the spots in this leopard are like, 95% of the painting is getting the spots right. And I painted these in. I didn't want to use pure black to paint the spots, so I used mostly purple, and I think I mixed some blue in with it to get some of the darker spots. But I was using the watercolor, the round detail brush. I sized it down, and what I did, I'm going to use this empty layer at the top to show you. I was painting in spots, in just various patterns and directions. But then I would come back and I would use the soft round, and I would just kind of blur them together. And I'm just touching, just tapping. I've got the flow turned way up. If you turn the flow down, it doesn't bleed as much, and the size of the brush. I have everything turned way up for demonstration. Let me do it again. And you can see in different places where I just blurred some of the spots so that they would have hard and soft edges, right? And another tool that I found useful for blurring was there's a smudge tool. It's little hand and finger icon. And under the effects category, there's two brushes called ink stains and ink spread. And I found that these two brushes work really well for smudging watercolor as well. So you can just kind of smudge it out and just create where the water might flow. Just kind of spread out some of the hard edges. So you can see throughout the spots on the leopard, I just decided to blur some areas, and so that everything didn't have a complete hard edge. And I added, on the next layer, I added some various colors. And I wanted to use, for the leopard, I wanted to use a color scheme that was primarily orange and purple because they're opposite on the color wheel, and I knew that they would be complementary. Now, I went a little bit on the blue side, a little bit on the green side, but primarily I wanted to stick with orange and purple. So what I did here was I used mostly the watercolor wash soft, and I would just blend out various colors. And I had it turned up, I had the flow turned up and the brush size. And I was just blending colors, right? And just filling in some of the, you know, in some of the darker areas, I used more of a deeper kind of a brownish orange would be kind of maybe a sienna in traditional paint colors. And I just started filling in and just started coloring my sketch. And where's that one? I'll get rid of that real quick. Oh, another really cool feature that I kind of discovered by accident. I couldn't figure it out in the beginning, but as you're painting along, let me get another brush here. Let me get a charcoal brush so you can kind of see what this looks like. And let me get a color that you can see real well. Turn the flow up. So, all right. So what I was saying was that I found this feature that if you're painting and you want to erase, you can press this button down here, and it will erase with the same brush that you have selected. And then if you double tap, it'll keep the eraser selected, or it'll keep the eraser as the active tool until you double tap it again. Mm-hmm. And that was really useful in my workflow because I kept switching back to the eraser, and you can't choose the same brush that you're using from the eraser tool. You can only do it from the little tap thing. You can move this thing around to wherever you want on the screen. I thought that was useful, and it took me a little bit. That wasn't intuitive enough. It took me a little bit to discover that. Okay, I'm going to start to reveal some of these layers, and let's see. Okay, that was a highlight layer. I just took just the live paint, the watercolor round, and I just took a light yellow and just painted in some of the highlights. I added a background wash, and I did that with the again, the water. These were my two main brushes that I used in this. The watercolor, the soft wash, and I just scaled it up all the way and took the water flow up all the way and just kind of just started to make clouds, right? And then I took that same blur tool and just started to smooth it out and to create like a watercolor wash gradient in that background. And that's really fun.
That's so much depth.
Yeah, I can spend a lot of time and just resizing the brush. You know, you'll create different plume sizes, right? And next I put in, let's see. One thing that it also took me a little while to get used to was the way that the layers, I can't tell unless this panel is open right here, I can't necessarily tell what blend mode and what the opacity is. And I would always try and turn, I try to click it to turn the visibility on and off. So it did take me a little bit of getting used to on that. As you can see, since I have that panel open, that's an overlay layer. I took another light yellow, and I'll turn it on and off so you can see. And I'm just painting in just some, and I'm blurring the edges again, same process over and over. And I'm just hitting some highlights with an overlay layer. So when I say overlay, I have the blend mode set from normal right here, and you can see what it looks like. That's the normal paint, and I just changed it to overlay.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did the same thing with like a purple shadow layer, and I'll change that to normal too, so you can see what that looks like. You can see I'm just taking in the shadow areas, and I took that purple that I used in the spots, and I just changed it to overlay and just painted in some shadow areas. And one thing that is also really important in, let me move this over a little bit. One thing that's really important in like big cat paintings, and for a leopard, certainly the spots, but the whiskers are really super important. And I took a brush, I think it was one of the basic brushes. I think it was probably maybe the hard round or the hard round variable, and just sized it way down and just used that to paint in the detail for, because you need a really fine line for the whiskers. And one thing that's important when painting whiskers is they don't all go in the same direction. Like you need a variation to get a kind of a realistic whisker on a big cat. So it's always my favorite part. When I get to the whiskers, I think, oh man, I'm getting there. Like this thing's coming together when I get to the whiskers. And then there's also these these eyebrows, or I don't know what they're called. These sort of whiskers that are above a cat's eye. We'll call them cat brows. I don't know. And let's see. Next up,
I feel like every man develops eyebrows like that after a certain age, Nathan.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I can only hope when I'm, in my 80s, I have eyebrows just like that. I can't do a watercolor generally without some splatters. And I just showed you earlier, there's this really cool watercolor splatter. And I splattered mostly in white and dark, like white and then the dark of the spots, the dark purple. And I'm just scattering those around. And one thing, like if you have two colors selected with the color picker, I'll show you real quick. I can move it. If you have, let's try to get to, oh, there it is. I have to select the multicolor. If you have two colors selected, see, it's gonna use. That's just really cool to me. I can't.
Amazing.
Yeah, I can't say how cool that is. I mean, it's just really awesome to be able to. Let's see. I'm gonna turn the flow down, or I'm gonna turn the flow up, and then paint over this, and they all just blend together. It's just so fun to watch. It's incredibly satisfying. All right, I'm gonna clear that, and then. Okay, so I pretty much was like, 98% there on this painting. And this probably took, we walked through this, really fast here, but this probably took a good 2 to 3 hours, from sketch to painting and getting used to these fresco tools. So don't ever think that, I didn't crank this out in 20 minutes, so don't feel bad if it takes you. I say that a lot, but if you spend 3 to 4 hours on a painting like this, and that's perfectly fine and perfectly normal. So the last thing I wanted to kind of blend the colors together. Now there's Fresco doesn't have some of the same tools that like Photoshop or Procreate has, where you might put in like maybe an adjustment layer that is maybe a color balance or a curves. At least I couldn't find one. So what I did was I just painted a big purple. I'll show you on the normal blend mode. It's just a big, giant purple mess, right? But when I switched it to overlay, it just sort of blends the colors together. It really brings out that purple that I wanted in the beginning. I wanted that good orange and purple color balance. Or color scheme. And I felt like this overlay layer kind of brought all that together. So that was my painting, or this is my painting that I did with the tools that come free with Fresco.
Amazing. What a great piece.
Oh yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I can't stress on painting like this when you're kind of trying to find a balance between like maybe a little bit of realism, but a little bit of abstractness to it. Build up on layers. I tried to keep everything separate as much as I could. A lot of times I paint on 1 or 2 layers, But I kept this one separate because I wanted you to see that like it's just a buildup of layers, layer upon layer. Whether you're painting in the same layer or you're separating them, it's still a buildup. You know, you're building up from, you know, minimal. You're just building color on top of color, and a lot of it is experimentation. Also, you know, seeing what works for the shadows and what works for the highlights. Maybe trying an overlay layer or a color dodge, and just seeing, you know, if you can produce some happy accidents, right? Mm-hmm. That sounds like a Bob Ross term, right? Happy accidents.
happy little accidents. Yeah.
Yes, happy little accidents. They're so freeing. Okay, so if you do have the paid version, if you have an Adobe subscription, and you have the paid version, you have the ability to import third-party brushes. And I was able to bring in some of the Ultimate Toolbox brushes. I brought in the acrylics, the oils, and of course the pencils, because I wanted a better pencil than what I could find, and the watercolors. And I'll show you real quick kind of what these look like in Fresco. Just give you a quick demo. Looks like some of the acrylic brushes.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it really, and again, I've got two colors selected, so it's giving you that dual color paint. And these, I was surprised and really excited to see how well these translated from Photoshop, because these would be the Photoshop brushes, the .avr Photoshop brush files that I brought in. How well these worked in Fresco. I was really excited to see it because it opens up a new avenue for that brush set to be used in another way on the iPad. And that was just really exciting to me to just see how well they did. So many brushes, right? So much, just so much goodness, right?
I love this pack so much. It just makes me smile.
Thank you so much. I want to show you real quick. Oh, let me show you there's a couple of good watercolor. Oh, a lot of good watercolors, especially with this. Let me turn it down. I got some of these turned way up. Just some of these. Here we go. Whoa. Very sensitive. There we go.
Oh,
and then,
nice.
of course, you can blend them out, but then you can also, they will bleed with the live brush, right? See how that's bleeding out?
Mm-hmm.
Or running, It's so good. Are you still with me?
Yeah, I am. I'm kind of mesmerized, to be honest.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure I don't lose you. The screen lagged for a second.
All good.
Okay. I'm going to actually, let's look at a painting that I did using the Ultimate Brush Toolbox and Fresco.
Wow.
Okay, this is a cardinal that I did with. This is again, this is a minimal color scheme. I wanted to use purples and oranges and yellows. I wanted to paint a cardinal without using red, was kind of my goal here. And I used primarily the watercolor set, the Ultimate Brush Toolbox watercolor set, and the pencils. I kind of used the pencil set as a colored pencil to get kind of a mixed media effect. You can still see some of my line work in here because I painted a lot. In fact, we'll look at some of the layers and I'll kind of show
I love the mixed media look. This is legit one of my favorite pieces I've ever seen you make, Nathan. I like it that much.
You're so kind.
Yeah, I'm going to stop being kind in a minute. I have to make fun of you or something. But no, it's amazing. To be honest, I've always been a huge fan of mixed media. I just find it so visually interesting how the different medias combine.
I completely agree. At one point in time, when I first started painting in traditional watercolor, I was one of those traditionalists. It has to be if it's watercolor, it has to be all watercolor. And it wasn't until I started really researching and diving into the work of Drew Struzan, who painted movie posters in the 80s and 90s primarily. But how he used mixed media to achieve what he did in poster art, it really opened my mind to the idea of the end result versus how you get there, right? It wasn't, it was no longer important to me to just stick with purely watercolor. You know, I cared more about the end result. It didn't matter so much the tools that I used to get there. Had the end result in my mind instead of the strict rules of, you know, this has to be watercolor, or this has to be, you know, colored pencil only. You know, so
I think I remember you. I remember you showing off his work in one of the earliest sessions you did with us, I think. And correct me if I'm wrong, did he use quite a lot of these like rim lights and that kind of thing and quite fine detailing?
He did, and he did that with he would airbrush acrylic and use a colored pencil primarily. And he used a lot of tricks to get texture with acrylic, and he used airbrush to spray acrylic, and then he would go in with fine details using colored pencil. And that just blew my mind for some reason. That may be, you know, totally normal to some people, but when I was first, you know, studying that and researching what he did, it just absolutely blew my mind. So I try to incorporate, you know, mixed media wherever I can. I mean, watercolor is probably my favorite media to work in. But whenever I can incorporate mixed media, I don't try to stick with just one. You know, even in my traditional watercolor is typically mixed media in some form.
Love it.
So, okay, I also brought in a paper texture from the Ultimate Brush Toolbox. It comes with several paper textures, and you can see it right here. I used it. I turned the opacity down. I'll turn it up, and you can see it maybe. Oh, gotta select the right layer. It's set to multiply. I also copied it, and it's up here as well. So it's above and below some layers. It's set to overlay. And I think it's the brown tone paper. So like if I set it to normal, it's going to cover everything up. But if I have it on overlay, you can see that it just kind of, it deepens some of the paper texture details. The sketch is still visible in this one. But I want to see if I can show you kind of where I started out with this. I'm going to turn off some of these layers, and we'll just kind of go through a little bit of what I did here, where I started and kind of what my thinking was as I was working through it. There's the sketch. This one had a lot more layers.
Amazing. And just while you're turning layers off, shout out for the Ultimate Brush Toolbox. Still currently the most popular pack at Design Cuts. People are loving these brushes. Thousands and thousands of design cutters have been loving these brushes, and we can see many of you in the comments just evangelizing about them and saying how awesome they've been for your workflow. So not only are they great brushes, and there are hundreds of them, but they work across a range of softwares from Affinity to Procreate to the Adobe Suite, which is pretty amazing. So whatever platform you're on, the brushes should be compatible.
Yes, and now even Adobe Fresco is another one to add to the list. I was so incredibly pleased with how well they worked in Fresco. I can't say it. I mean, they were just beautiful.
Amazing.
So on this one, I started with this pencil sketch. Now this is a pencil. This is from the pencil pack. I think it's maybe the 6B pencil from the Ultimate Brush Toolbox pencil pack. And you can tell from my from the Leopard sketch to this one, this one's a lot more. I was more comfortable with this pencil, and I was able to get a little bit tighter sketch. So from here, I started adding some of those live paint watercolors, and was really enamored with the orange and yellow and the blending them together. I tried to keep the yellows in the highlight side and the oranges in the kind of the shadow side, but I knew I would be adding purple, which I believe I did here. Added some purple using the same brushes, using those live paint brushes, because I wanted to kind of have some of that blend in there for the shadows. And so I believe here is my paper. I'm gonna go ahead and turn that back on. And let's turn on see what this is. Okay, this I'm going to leave that one off because that was towards the end, and I believe that one is too. Let's see, I have here. Oh, I added in some. I just started bringing back some of the highlight. So on this layer here, I'm painting above the paper. So the layers I had on before, that they're below the paper, so they're a little bit. They become, when the paper gets turned on, they're a little bit muted. So I started painting above the paper from this point on, just so color would stand out. Okay, I added, this one is this yellow. It's just a big splotch of yellow to just kind of bring some brightness to the center, because I wanted to draw the eye in. So I did that with brightness. And this layer is set to overlay. Let's see here. Oh, this is when I started bringing in the colored pencil and just painting in some of those fine, like, feather highlights. I had several references of cardinals pulled up, and I bring that up because, you know, I've painted a lot of birds, a lot of cardinals, especially. A cardinal is one of my favorite birds to paint. Even though I've painted a lot of them, I don't have enough visual library of a cardinal to just paint one from scratch to this level of detail. And I say that because a lot of I get these questions a lot about reference, and maybe beginner artists, like, maybe they're afraid to use reference because reference might be cheating in some way or somehow, like they feel like they should, which kind of seems like artist abuse to me. Like they're just like they're not, you know, they're punishing themselves by not using what's out in the world existing as reference. And now I'm not saying that you have to copy a reference exactly as you see it, but, you know, pull together several, you know, pictures of big cats or birds or people or whatever it is to use as to just build a visual library from, right?
Absolutely.
It's not that you're copying exactly, but you're using it to fill in the gaps that your brain can't remember or it doesn't fully know or understand yet. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And really, I would just think about your own creativity. I think references are not only acceptable, but we had a great question earlier about how to paint on top of photos. I think even if you're part tracing, but then you're applying paint, that's a kind of form of mixed media, right? I used to do that at art college, where you'd almost have a scrapbook of photos and imagery, and then you'd paint and draw on top of it, and that can create some really interesting results.
Absolutely, it can, and it helps. Tracing can be a really good learning tool as well, because you begin to understand and you know, the subject. You begin to build in your you know, your visual library. You begin to build and understand by tracing something. So there's nothing wrong at all with, you know, tracing, especially as a learning tool. So don't ever overlook these things because you feel like somehow you're not a real artist, or you're cheating because you're using reference or you're tracing or whatever it is. I mentioned Drew Struzan before. He was very open about, you know, he was a trained artist that he knows how to draw, but he was under time constraints to produce film posters, and he would trace actors' faces even though he knew how to draw, and he would use that in his tracings. But he was open about, you know, hey, I'm tracing this guy, you know. And just to hear a professional artist say that and admit that openly. Norman Rockwell, he, you know, back in his day, he would trace from a projector, like an overhead projector. And whenever anyone came into his studio, he would cover it up. You know, he'd throw a sheet over it. And I thought that was kind of funny, because even someone on the level of Norman Rockwell felt ashamed that he was tracing from a overhead projector. So I thought that, you know, that's always kind of a funny tidbit about you know, the idea of tracing.
Yeah, I love that.
Okay, so more highlights with the colored pencil, just making the highlights brighter.
And that is kind of a rim light, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, definitely a rim light. Yeah, that previous layer was definitely a rim light. So the light from this bird is coming from overhead. Let me get one that I can show you. I can circle with. I'll show you exactly what I was thinking with the lighting. Let me create a new layer. Okay, so we can see some of this from here. So I'm imagining that the lighting is coming from here. And so this down here, so you'll see that the highlights here and this rim light over here. So everything from here up is rim light, and then everything from here down is bounce light, as if maybe the main light source is coming from this direction, hitting something and bouncing back up in that direction. So that's why these rim lights down here are not as bright as the ones up here.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Cool.
I wish you were my art teacher at school, Nathan.
Oh my gosh, you're so kind.
my art teacher was actually super talented, but slightly mean. I'm sure I've shared before, where he made me paint over my work with white paint and start over because I was too in my comfort zone, he said.
I've heard that before about mean art teachers, and it kind of killing the love for art, because my art teacher was mean. So I kind of hate to hear that. Okay, I just deepened the shadows here because at this point I'm standing back. At this point in a painting, like I'll probably zoom out like this, and so that I can see it from a distance. And basically, I'll turn the layer on and off and show you what I'm talking about. So see the difference in contrast at that distance? How it just gets a little bit more contrasty. I'm just going in and painting just those deeper purples to kind of just build up some contrast.
Beautiful. It's got such depth and richness to it now.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I'm looking for, is that level of depth. I just added some, just started to blend some paint into the background here. I think do it. And I'm using those wash brushes from the Ultimate Brush Toolbox watercolor set in order to get some of those textures in the background. And some splatters, of course, right? And those are splatters from the Ultimate Brush Toolbox as well. They're a little bit of a finer splatter, and the specs are a little bit more distanced than the ones that come by default with Fresco. And a little bit more rim light, a little bit more bounce light detail there. And I believe, let's go down here and turn some of these background things on here. Okay, now this was wash textures from the Ultimate Brush Toolbox watercolor set. I just wanted to just abstract the background a little bit and add some contrast in. And I think I did the same thing here with some yellow. Yeah, just to give it a real painterly background. The bird feels a little bit more realistic, so I kind of wanted to contrast the background by just adding some more painterly-like effects to the background. And I think the last layer here, that's an overlay, and I'm just painting that purple again to just kind of even it out, just to kind of blend everything and even out the color. And again, this one probably took a good maybe 2 hours or so to just kind of experiment and just kind of get down. I went in with the idea of a cardinal, not using red, and I kind of wanted it to be mixed media because of adding in the Ultimate Brush Toolbox brushes. And my thought process really was just to kind of get a level of realism with a little bit of abstract as well. And then this is what turned out.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm blown away. As much as I want to just keep looking at this amazing painting all day, feel free to stop sharing and come back and join me, Nathan. Amazing. Well, Nathan, thank you again for joining us. It's always such a pleasure hanging out with you and watching you work. The community absolutely love following along and learning from you. And I know we've got plenty more stuff planned. I won't give away any more than that, but we've got some big things cooking behind the scenes with Nathan this year, which I know all of you are going to love. So again, please do go follow and support Nathan. Definitely check out the Ultimate Brush Toolbox. If you haven't checked it out, trust me when I say the hype is justified. You can see everyone raving about this in the comments. It's definitely worth a look if you haven't checked it out yet. Great to see you, buddy. And we will catch up very soon, no doubt.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nathan. Appreciate you.